What if the key to a thriving future isn't competition, but collaboration? What if true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the strength of our relationships, the vitality of our ecosystems, and the creativity we bring to the world? In a time when old systems are breaking down, a new way of living is emerging. One rooted in generosity, reciprocity, and the natural flow of energy. How can we step into a gift-based economy that restores harmony between humanity and the earth? Welcome to the Future of Regenerative Culture, co-creating a thriving planet.
Tune in with the Galactic Spin podcast and expand your view.
In Lakesh, and greetings to everyone out there tapping in with us this evening. Welcome to the Galactic Spin podcast. My name is Mikuak Rai, Kin 126. Joined in this incredible journey with my brother Ruben Llinás, Kin 113, in alignment on assignment. Happy to represent in Lakesh, brother. How's it going?
In Lakesh, brother Makua, and to everyone watching us and tuning to the Galactic Spin, like every 7 days. Being here is always an opportunity to bring us back to the present moment and being aware of everything that is happening on this magnificent planet during this incredible time that we are living. So every week is a different world, and here we are just tracking from our hearts everything that is happening on the planet, acknowledging the hardship that a lot of people are feeling at the moment,
Yes.
but always looking for that spin, that spin, that other perspective that is more harmonious, more positive, and I think that's a great focus for every 7 days, just to have that that ability and that willingness to see the on the other side of the what seems sometimes as too much happening on the planet at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Certainly a lot happening on the planet, for sure. It certainly seems that way. And as you said, just really holding a space of empathy with others, with ourselves, with our loved ones and communities, as we're really transiting through what I guess I call this eye of the needle sort of experience. Like really, we have to really relinquish a lot of things we thought that, defined us perhaps, and really release those things to make it through this transitional time. So we do certainly hold the heart space and compassion with our relatives out here all over the world. There's all sorts of variables occurring at once. And so we do like to offer this space. As you mentioned, we do this every 7 days. We've been doing this since Gregorian October 7th, which was our first episode. And now here we are well into February 2025 for episode 18. It's great just to even recount that we've been keeping the pulse for this many episodes straight, bringing this energy forward and introducing also members of the human family who we really resonate with, their journey, their offerings, their expression at this precious time. And so thank you for everybody tuning in. We want to shout out those who tap in with us consistently in the live chat. Welcome. Shout out to Delia Sky from St. Petersburg, Florida. We love you. We give thanks for you. Special shout out as well to Alejandra and Ishel, always having our backs and grounding this energy at this most precious time. we're in a really beautiful window as well. As you mentioned, the reason we want to present this information to people is because as there are challenges happening, there are also indicators of harmony occurring. And when you have the lens of certain codices through which to perceive, we can begin to observe, which is what we're doing here. We're observing these synchronizations, observing this window of opportunity that is really open up to us.
Yeah.
And we also know that there are many parallel narratives happening right now. And in effect, there's almost a competition for sort of control of the narrative. There's a hyper accelerated narrative of the AI technology space that's obviously positing itself in a lot of conversations, sort of suddenly in a very accelerated way. Although for those of us who've been tracking this trend, we're not so surprised. It's just recognizing it's arriving at its own level of maturity. But alongside that, we also have other parallel efforts, among them the solar maximum that we're dealing with right now. There's a quality of a solar maximum that is in contrast with the technology. It may be disruptive to the technology, frankly. When you're looking at these plasma effects, and we understand the satellite array orbiting around the planet, keeping the technospheric grid sort of in order, that when nature decides to nudge or shift, these things can be disrupted. And we want to be mindful that these things can potentially be disrupted so that we're not also completely dependent on them.
Yeah.
It's a part of what the conversation today hopes to explore, because there is a bifurcation of the worlds. We're witnessing it, we're observing it, we're also in many ways participating with the shift, each one of us. And so there is sort of a choice point, I believe, that we're actually faced with now. And it looks like a distinctive choice, and what we decide to give consent to or participate with. And that's an ongoing choice. We know that narrative has been woven for the past several years. It's not a new conversation. Though I feel at the same time, we're also organically being shifted as artificially shifts are happening in the technology space. There's also an organic shift. And I do want to offer the suggestion that it's being affected by the sun, being impacted by the sun. So we as solar beings in various ways, which we are, as much as we're earthlings, we're also emanations. And we understand some of the lenses that we do make conscious here would even indicate that right now we're sort of the beginning of a new pulse calendar year that correlates the human design rave new year along with the Gene Keys pulse. And we know the Gene Key 41 is about the emanation. And we're now being informed, literally informed, through these mutations that are, again, becoming more and more conscious among our species. So lots going on. I'm hoping that our guest today can help us embody and ground some of these incredible influences that are affecting all of us. And that's one of the goals of really having this conversation today, diving into where we find ourselves in this timeline along this golden intersection, and recognizing the indicators. And by all indications, I can say that if we orient ourselves inwardly at this time, we're sure to see the that which our heart desires to see, because we want to orient to the fact that thoughts precede things. If we can anchor the thought in the heart and really be that emanation, there's I believe unbound changes and transformations toward the good that we're going to experience. And this is running along a parallel competitive sort of attention grabbing reality or alternate reality of the machine narrative.
Yeah.
You got that narrative. And it's not to say that machine bad. I don't subscribe to that either. It's not about bad or good so much. It's about really integrating and embodying at this point. I'm again excited for our guest, because I think he's going to help us through his own experience, kind of, help us tap in to where we are sort of in that collective, because there's this idea that when one of us are healed, all of us are healed. So I believe somebody like our guest tonight, who's been on his hero's journey, in a transformative journey, very deliberately, in his adult life in particular, he has I would say, wisdom and medicine from the journey to share with the collective. And that's one of the
Mhm.
reasons we're excited to have him.
Yes.
As we like to tap in tonight, though, we want to tune in with the Earth's pulse and just kind of take a look at, again, what's behind some of what's informing and affecting the collective right now. And
Yeah.
I think we'll see momentarily really how critical and what a big player the sun is in this current episode in which we find ourselves. All right. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Stay tuned. So we know that the sun is a major protagonist of the
Mm.
shift that we're all experiencing. And, you know, making this conscious, I think, is very important because we are seeing a lot of dynamic manifestations of shift, you know, happening. It seems like eruptions and all sorts of different things popping up. And
Yes.
what's interesting at the same time is we sometimes neglect to remember that we're part of a solar system.
Hmm.
Talk about systems change. The solar system is also subject to change.
Yeah.
I think what we're experiencing now are some of the outpourings or manifestations of that running concurrent with this acceleration in the technology space.
Hmm.
As we've seen that also on, essentially, as we've identified in past episodes here, we know there's sort of an exponential curve up between Gregorian 2025 and 2030 that the AI technology uh,
Hmm.
is taking. And we've talked about that a little bit. We see that also in the efforts of energy companies to be able to power the data centers and the AI systems because they require so much more energy to
Yes.
process all of the data and the information, and you know, in that sense. So we're noticing a lot. But I'd love to invite you, Ruben, if you want to tap into what you've noticed with the solar energy, even as of today and yesterday.
Yes, and also as a startup, let's go back to our episode from 7 days ago when we were doing a brief recap. So let's remember that October 15, 2024, 1 year to the golden intersection of timeline, is when NASA and NOAA were the two main bodies of observation of solar phenomena and space weather, declared the solar maximum. So since then, we have been witnessing and experiencing a ramping up of solar activity, because this solar maximum has to do with solar activity and the amount of sunspots. So for those people who are new, basically the sun has a pulse, like the graphic that we see on the right, and in that pulse, in the last 2 days, because if we see the horizontal axis is universal time, and from February 2nd to February 3rd, we have had 7 M flares, which is the medium type of flare. But these are all Earth directed, because as we can see, that white spot on at the center of the sun is facing us. When we see images from SOHO, which is the satellite that tracks the solar activity, and the main focus of action is taking place at the center. That's the Earth axis.
Mm-hmm.
So the same way that we have a pulse, well, the Earth has a pulse and the sun has a pulse. And if we can see on the left, there is a gentleman, David Strange, on in the UK, that wrap a ruler around the sun to illustrate the awesome scale of this giant sunspot complex that is emerging, which is really like the merging of several areas, active areas of the sun in one big surface. And as we can see below, the Earth is that little dot, so that we can put in scale these major solar activity, where we receive these these 7 flares, is probably around 20 to 30 times the size of the Earth. No? So that gives us like a small perspective of how big these explosions are, and how important it is to track the solar activity, because it's basically the director of the evolutionary processes on the planet.
So let
Anything.
me ask you a question. That's a lot of information. What do we think the impact then is? You're mentioning 7 of these M-class flares pointed directly at the Earth at this time, and this is just one of a sequence. But it seems 7 is quite a few to be coming in sort of a direct package, right? How soon does the impact of that reach us here? And then what do you anticipate may be some of the impact or the effect?
Well, we are not experts, but what we over the years, what we have been learning is that when events like this happen, well, the Earth has little to no time to recover from one breaking down of the magnetic shield. So when the magnetic shield, which is protecting the surface of the Earth of receiving this radiation, breaks down and has no way to repair itself before the next arrives, we have more incoming energy, and that can be translated into telluric movements on the Earth. And of course, we are part of the Earth, so some social type of upheaval also, which is what we are starting to feel a little bit, and some people are tapping into the volatility and the sensitivity
Hmm.
of what is happening. It was only 2 episodes ago that it was King 197 Red Lunar Earth, and we started a new stage in geopolitics, which is the new US administration. And since then, we have been witnessing a lot of telluric shifts on the planet. So what we recommend is, just since we are sensitive to these energies, because we are part of life, making them conscious really help us ground them, and be observant of not coming out of balance, because it's very easy to get triggered these days, and people are polarized around the world. We commented on the last episode that there is the left versus right paradigm, or the east versus west worlds are being put against each other. So we are that point of neutrality that will hold the balance when things start to get really, really moving.
Speak
And
about this quickly, just because I know we have a lot to cover tonight. So,
yes,
regarding this, it's now 89 seconds to midnight. I know last week we presented the doomsday clock, as they refer to it, right?
yeah, the idea was just to give like a brief report on what the group of experts, scientists, of course, from academia, believe to be the close peril to self annihilation, which is this bulletin of the atomic sciences and the doomsday clock, the tool that they themselves design, and that it was created or intended to be used only for nuclear emergencies. But all the different crises that we have been experiencing are adding up to the pressure. And of course, they decided just to move the clock from 90 seconds to 89 seconds to midnight, just 1 second, as a symbol of how delicate it is, the moment that we are living, because this is the closest in summary, this is the closest that it has ever been since 1947, when this group of atomic scientists started to come together every year to assess the nuclear risk. And now this is the moment when we have been closer to midnight, which is the like the zone of no return, so to speak. And of course, artificial intelligence plays a big role on this because of the uncertainty fact and the acceleration that we have been feeling also since the entrance of the new administration, also because it's connected, it's all like a power, the power wheels have been activated at that whole different level. So we can feel now this acceleration in the mainstream news and in the media, but we need to keep our awareness above and beyond all the drama that is playing out, because it's really characters playing their roles, and we need to be above that, above the drama, above all these competitive narratives and um, and perspectives on what is happening on Earth. But of course, from the perspective of the synchronic order, all of this has plays a significant role in terms of the frequency and the number, no? Because the way that nature communicates and that the synchronic order operates is through frequency and number. And the good things about this announcement is that 89 is precisely one of the numbers on the spiral, on the logarithmic spiral. So it's, let's say, that is in harmony, despite the fact that this is a tool that should not even probably exist, because we should be focused is on the developing our sense of time, not using more clocks or constraining instruments to experience time, like the mechanical clock, like this symbolic clock, and like the Gregorian calendar. So that this space that we have been holding for the last 18 weeks is really to create like an alchemical container for all these narratives to transform into something new. And we are super happy to have this guest today, because is the purpose of regenerative culture is how can we come to a point that everything is recycled, is zero waste culture, is a culture in that there is absolutely no waste, and that is able to bring us to the next level of our evolution. So changing our time frequency is part of that, but grounding that on Earth is a whole different story, and we are going to speak more about that tonight.
Absolutely. I think that what's interesting about the doomsday clock is that that's sort of an example of a parallel narrative that is competing again for our attention. And so in a sense, there's the riddling and stratifying through fear or concern. Not to say that there's not something to be concerned about. Clearly there is. However, what's not necessarily so obvious is how our attention is being manipulated and even weaponized against us. So there's a real interesting thing there, because we're so entrenched in it sometimes we don't even realize how we're being used to amplify the thing that we don't want to see. So we really have to be very deliberate to discern. And I want to take the time here. You mentioned the pulse that's coming through with the earth, with the sun. And we mentioned also with the gene keys, it's referred to as the pulse calendar. And we're now in the second phase in the new pulse new year of the gene keys, where we were in gene key 41 initially, and now we're in gene key 13. And this gene key in particular deals specifically with the
Synergy.
shadow. Say it again.
Yeah, synergy is the CD. Synergy
Of
and
13, I think empathy, in fact, if I'm not mistaken. So we're in basically the shadow band of discord right now.
mhm,
And this
mhm,
is important to understand. There's a collective consequence to the gene keys. As much as we're also individually being mutated, it's the collective mutation as a species. Whether we see ourselves separate or not, or unified or not, we're still
mhm,
a collective species, for
mhm,
better or for worse. So we're navigating through this process of the discord as the shadow frequency right now of gene key 13. Interesting that it's the number 13, because for those who've been tracking our work, we identify 13 as the harmonic factor for
mhm,
various reasons, because of its ubiquitousness across cultures and through mathematical systems, right? And what it points
mhm,
to. But the gene key 13 in particular introduces us to the gift of discernment,
mhm,
because discernment is so critical, particularly at this time, because again, there's a great risk of our attention being deployed against us in not so positive ways. So we again want to have a sense of clarity in relationship to thought, coherent thought, but also have those around us who mirror clarity and don't just like there's the group think that's also a risk, because there's a go along to get along kind of wave.
mhm,
And a lot
mhm.
of people jumped on that wave. And as a result, it's caused a whole lot of distortions
Yeah.
among people who even maybe before that wave had greater clarity. So now we have to again move through these processes of clarification, and as we do, this is where that civic quality of empathy is magnetized to us, I believe.
Mhm,
As we move through that discernment, we're afforded the quality of empathy,
mhm,
because it's important to be able to observe and hold space throughout this transformative time,
mhm,
especially. So this is also a time of finding the others. And we want to encourage people to continue to stay open, remain open, that you're going to find others who are on the similar frequency or path and trajectory
mhm,
as you make this journey. Uh, as we do that inner work, then we're going to see the reflection of that in the external as well. So, relative to that, we are going to take the moment now to sink in and tune up, because we do like to posit an
mhm,
awareness for our audience as to where we are according to the natural time frequency. And I'll say in short that as we look at the natural time frequency, you can imagine that as like your future self that came back to now to help present some of these codes of solution, or codes of liberation, we might even say, to help us
mhm,
navigate the muck and the mire of this very distorted phase shifts that we find ourselves navigating through together. So this
mhm,
is intended to also be added to your toolkit as a method to derive greater clarity and actually make sense, because it's helpful to find sense-making methods. It's not the only one, but certainly it's one of the important ones at this time that has, I think, become available to humanity. So thank you again, everyone, for sinking in and tuning up with us. All right. So, as we have been stating since the beginning of this year, since we started this podcast within the year of the Blue Rhythmic Storm, we are in the Blue Rhythmic Storm year. It turns out it's the 37th year out of 52 years in this new Sirius cycle, the first new Sirius cycle since the year 1987, when this new time lens was presented to humanity as a solution. I'd love to invite you, Ruben, if you'd love to elaborate on anything more.
No, I think that the people who are just tracking us just know now, because we reaffirm these principles every 7 days, so that we can refresh our memories, because one of the functions of memory is to forget. And so the more we get used to these numbers and we ground them, because part of the conversation today is how to embody these new codes, how to really experience them instead of just knowing them intellectually or mentally. This is the big difference at the moment of how are we going to live this transformation. It's not by knowing more stuff and getting more information and getting becoming aware of what is happening in the world, in the so-called reality, but that we know, as our one of our guests, Unitively says, is the fictional fiction. So in order to navigate that fictional fiction, it's important to use tools that are based in harmony. And here what we are seeing is the core of the synchronometer, and this year, which is the year of the blue rhythmic storm, well, is bringing us an opportunity for a big transformation and catalyzing process, because we, in the same way that we have 13 moons in 1 year, we have a cycle of 13 years, and we are closing that 6 year, navigating that 6 year, and entering that 7th year next in July 26, 2025. So basically, the golden intersection of timelines will take place within that 7th year of a 13-year cycle. And what we are doing now is just preparation to entrance to that central channel, or that main cycle of 13 years within that 13-year cycle, of a cycle of 13 months within that 13-year cycle. So the structure, or the hologram of 13, is called a wave spell, and we can see that this is the what is called the planetary service wave spell, in which each unit is one moon. We are in the 7th moon. This is the last episode of this 7th moon. And in the next slide, we can see that the fractal of those 13 units within one of the 13 cycles of the 1320 matrix, one of the 20 cycles of 13 days of the 1320 matrix, corresponds to the human wave spell, which is the cycle commanded by the yellow human, that is inviting us to expand our ability to use or influence the world through our free will, and our wisdom to express that free will.
If I can just posit this real quick too, because this has come up, and for folks tuning in maybe for the first time, who are aware that we're in the rhythmic storm year, when we apply the yellow human in this case, it is a fractal overlay for the year, just to be clear. So there still is the action of the rhythmic storm, that catalyzation, organization, balance, self-generation is still in effect with a fractal layer, excuse me, of the yellow human. So it's really about the marriage of that yellow human and that storm energy together. How is this storm and catalytic energy catalyzing our free will? And we realize ourselves to be at a great, tremendous point of choice right now. So free will is really all about that choice. So just to provide that for folks as well, because there are multiple layers that are informing sort of where we find ourselves in the cycles currently.
Yeah, of course, and the year bearer, which is the blue rhythmic storm, it's called the year bearer, the first day of the year, that gives the energy, or that embodies the energy of the whole year, is a marker for the whole year. But within this structure, we can really appreciate the energy of each of the moons within that year. So, for instance, the energy for this entire 7th moon is the energy, or the archetype of the white resonant mirror. So the mirror is basically the energy that is inviting us to really open our channels and serve as anchors for this frequency and for the order or the synchronic order to act through us and inform us, so that we can become conduits or antennas for these frequencies to ground on Earth. That's the embodiment part. How do we do the embodiment? Well, knowing the layers of the synchronic order is one way mentally, but then applying this to our everyday reality is different. So part of the purpose of for instance, the Galactic Culture Master Plan was to bring this to the social order and see how our human interaction will really shift when we apply this not just to our daily lives but in community, which is a little bit of the conversations that we will go deeper today, and how to make those visions a reality, because so far there is only like an invitation for people to live in under this system, or not not even the word under is a good expression, because it's really becoming the larger web of life, which is the Solkin and the 1320 matrix is basically the blueprint for life. So the more we get entrained or attuned to these frequencies, the more these frequencies inform us upon the what we are here to do. Basically, we are following an evolutionary plan, and the idea is that the human species is the cosmic vibratory root. What was our way to say? We are kind of the connecting the tissue between the cosmos and the earth, and the idea is to bring ground those energies on the planet. So this entire moon is that rod, that's a rod for the energy to come in and for us to ground in balance. So the also the energy of the mirror help us to become yogis and yoginis of our own lives and destinies. And here, what we can see is that, well, in the green squares where we are today is the 3rd of February. It's kin 211, the blue electric monkey on the 260-day count, and on this resonant moon is day 25. So this is the last week, or the 4th heptad of this 28-day cycle, and these 4 weeks that are in this midpoint of the year are basically the 4 kin that are in the 1320 matrix. So what we are really saying is that, because we are entering today also, well, the 3rd day of this wave spell of the red moon. In the next slide, we can see how on the 1328 we are finishing the 7th moon, but on the 1320 we just entered that green square, which is kin 209 to kin 221. That's the red wave spell, the moon of the wave spell of the red moon, while on the other side is the 7th moon of the year. So it's like a double moon energy that we are experiencing right now, because it's the moon energy, which is all about purification and flow on the 1320 matrix, and it's also we are closing that 7th moon, that 7th central moon of the year. So of course, emotions. So we need to keep our emotions in place, because the moon also relates to water and to flowing with what life presents. So this entire wave spell of the moon is the start of a cycle called a castle. It's a 52-day cycle that in the next slide we can see how the 1320 matrix has basically 5 cycles of 52 days called castles, and we are entering right now the last cycle of 52 days, the green castle it's called. And if you check the next slide, what we see is that during this entrance to this cycle, we are basically 52 days away from closing this entire 260-day cycle, which is the cycle 53 of 260 days so that we are closing. That means that those frequencies are informing us in the background, the 52 and the 53, since we entered 2 days ago this cycle. And this cycle has also like an important prophetic event, which is the discovery of the tomb of King Pakal on King 218 in exactly 7 days. On our next episode, we will speak a little bit more about it, not to, but this is the basis of all the prophecies, and is part of is a very it's a key component of the golden intersection of timelines as the intelligence or the driving frequency that is really orchestrating a lot of the cycles that are coming together and the events that are synchronizing is the energy of Pakal Botan. Is this Mayan sage and prophet who lived in Palenque and whose tomb was discovered in 1952 by archaeologist Alberto Ruz, and it changed the history of the planet. Since its discovery, the DNA was discovered later that year. The DNA code was deciphered, and since then we have been in this rapid process of unveiling. Since that initial prophecy started to become veiled, more and more information is coming to the surface and making everything way more crystal clear. In this case, the golden intersection is an expression of this prophetic stream, and we are super honored to be able to present that to more people, because this is a mathematical confirmation of a psychomythical aspect of the law of time, which is the prophecy of Pakal Botan. So we'll speak more about it in the next episode, and we only have one slide left, which is showing the two expressions or the two ways that the 260-day matrix is presented. This is another array, which is the fifth force oracle array. So we are right at the center. If you want to elaborate a little bit on this array, brother.
Sure. And thank you for setting up the graphics as well, because what this does is it shows the structure, as you mentioned, with the Zolkeen, with the 13 columns. But in this case, you have the 5 castles. And where we do find ourselves, we're now day 3 of that center castle of 52 days, as you were mentioning. So essentially, this is presenting us with the almost gamification of these tools. It's important to understand that these tools come about as a consequence of the shift in consciousness. And according to Lloydine Arguelles, when this was initially being presented to humanity, and Lloydine, again, along with Dr. Jose Arguelles, were the ones responsible for presenting these tools to humanity, that this tool was presented as a gift from the Galactic Federation. Now, I know that may seem like a way over the most of people's heads concept, but what we have to begin to recognize is part of the acceleration since the 1940s has been for us as a species to remember we're actually part of a galactic greater whole. We're not just here on some planet in isolation. We're part of a greater fabric of consciousness. So even with the coming to terms with terminologies concerning galactic this or that, that's a part of our evolution, is to actually remember that we're part of a broader tapestry that is galactic in scope. And so one of the purposes of these tools is, as I was looking at the wave spell, for example, those 13 moons, right? 28 days each moon. One example of that are 13 moons, or wave spell, planetary service wave spell. But those are like galactic guardrails for us. So when you're navigating a particular path, you have guardrails to keep you on the road, right? And when you even use the 13 moon tool, what you're literally doing, like a turtle, is you're walking the 13 moons. Part of the allegory of the turtle in nature is that the turtle carries the 13 moons on its back, on its shell. Every turtle features 13 segments on its shell, surrounded by 28 smaller segments. So the inherent frequency of nature's timing is reflected in nature. Like, it's actually showing up in the natural tapestry, in the natural order. So when we look at things like that, the idea of applying both a galactic lens as well as a natural timing frequency only makes sense, because we're not mechanized beings. We're not beings that are just the subjects of world religions, for example. Those are other paradigms that have obviously emerged over the past several centuries, or thousands, millennia even. And those worldviews serve a purpose as long as that purpose is served. Now, at a certain point, we have to begin to shift and come to terms with the fact that a lot of those frameworks have been, unfortunately, corrupted. And the greatest things start out with the best intentions. But we also should hold the position that if something is not serving our best or highest interest, we have the right to reformulate or shift it. That's one of the things built into the U.S. Constitution, in fact, in the preamble. And it's one of those things that oftentimes people forget, although at the same time it could be argued that some people may be exercising that right now. If that particular entity no longer serves the interests of the people have the right to alter or abolish it. So on a certain level, this is the same sentiment maybe that we're holding towards the Gregorian calendar. That's been a scenario that's kept us statically contained in a frequency that has us completely disconnected from nature. Now, some might argue that the Gregorian calendar started out to try to correct the errors of the Julian calendar, but then that presupposes that the Julian calendar was even originally intended to be supportive to our evolution. There's an argument to be had there, perhaps. Anyway, the point of all of this is that we're at a time in the timeline collectively where we've been, I would say, inundated with gifts and tools from, we could say, the higher worlds, for example. Just as an example, maybe as that would be characterized by Rudolf Steiner, perhaps. Just to note that we are riding a time shift, a phase shift. All of us are here. We all showed up at this time for our assignment, whatever role that may be. So thank you for showing this, and just to help give people a sense of where we do find ourselves along the timing of these tools. And if people have questions, and I'm sure they're going to have questions, one thing to do, though, is to note what your galactic signature is. In order to actually enter into synchrony with this paradigm, that is kind of the passport, or the entry key, is to actually decode yourself. And we always ask our guests, what their galactic signature is. And for those that may not know it, we certainly support to decode them, and just to ensure that they at least have that node of orientation, because that's a node of synchronicity. And especially today, and we're going to introduce our guest here in a few moments, but we're going to get into a beautiful synchronicity that emerges with his kin, which I think is a beautiful place to start our conversation with him as we explore. But just to, again, provide that sort of orientation, that's why we share on the screen our kin numbers and things like that, because other things begin to emerge when you start to add those numbers together. And you see other frequencies emerging in any given situation, any given arrangement or date, for that matter. So thank you again, Ruben, for sharing these fantastic images. And as we sort of shift into this next phase, I do want to bring up this next scene here, just to basically give an explanation of the
Mhm.
fifth force oracle that we were just looking at. Because again, these are new tools. It's a new time. It requires new tools. One metaphor to describe the fifth force oracle is that the galactic signature is the fourth dimensional flower bud. Then the fifth force oracle is the shimmering flower blossom. Okay, the bud is your kin, and the blossom is the oracle that surrounds it. If the fifth force oracle is our blossomed fourth dimensional flower, then the oracle board is the flower garden of galactic G force. Um, Ruben, do you want to elaborate on what is inferred by galactic G force, just briefly, and then we'll go ahead and move forth.
Yes, yes, of course. Well, basically, everything in the synchronic order is connected to what is called the fifth force or the synchronic force, the G force, and is that fifth or quintessential element
Yeah.
that represents the spirit and the movement of time. So in our personal oracles and in the oracle journey board, which is this array of the Solkin, the 5 cycles of 52 days display as a flower, we are basically entered that central point, that fifth area, which is green, that brings the fifth force element, which is the spin, the G force. Jose Arguelles used to say that there were different forces in nature, and one was the gravity, two was electromagnetism, the third one was the weak forces within the atomic structure, which is the bonds between the electrons, and the fourth one is the strong forces, the forces or the binding energy inside the nucleus, the protons, that creates atomic energy when it's broken. And the last one is the fifth force, or the G force, which is the synchronic force that makes everything spin or move together. So we have, let's say that in the traditional Native American and indigenous traditions, we have the four corners, which is the four corners of space. But time is the fifth element that makes those four corners move. And that creates that cosmology of the five as the anima mundi that creates the movements of things in space. And of course, the aspect of the dream spell that makes it more beautiful is that depending on how we perceive this entrance to the green castle, which is the center, we can also appreciate even more that we are in the seventh moon, because we are at the heart of a cycle of 13 moons. So we are basically at the center, and then in this array, we are also at the center of the movement. That brings us a little bit more of perspective, or a bird's eye view, or of the importance of the moment that we are living on. Why is so key to keep our balance and our axis really grounded, so that we can stay neutral in the midst of change and radical shifts, that like the one that are happening now on Earth. And this 52-day cycle that we just entered holds also like a psychomythic aspect that is called the theft of time. Is during this stage at a fractal scale, of course, because we the same way that we have 260 kin, there are 260 dream spell centuries, or centuries within this storyline. in which we have three genesis: the dragon genesis from kin 1 to kin 130, then comes the monkey genesis from kin 131 to kin 1 to kin 208, which is was 4 days ago, and now we start a third period, which is called the moon genesis, and within this 52 century is when basically we lost the memory of the ancient order of time. It's when the Babylonian time took over and we enter into a sort of wrap-up bubble. So Jose described that loss of memory as the theft of time, which is really the distortion of the power of the cyclical power of number 13 and the replacement of that power by number 12, which is the Babylonian conspiracy, the Babylonian way of measuring time based on 12, not on 13. Again, 13 is a dynamic number, 12 is a static number, so it prevents dynamism within the system. The 12 unit structures to measure time really keep us on a flat plane. Number 13, as we mentioned, is on the spiral, is the seventh step on that organic spiral of creation. And here, what we see in this slide is the description of that particular event called the theft of time, which is really an archetypal construct to define what happened, this loss of memory. So it says, when we look at this theft of time, this moment is what split the previous dream spell genesis. It split the mythic order so that we have what is called the fall from the sacred to the profane. We have a split in these hemispheres showing the brain. We have the dominance of one half of the brain over the other, and the dominance of one half of the globe over the other, which first goes from Eastern Hemisphere to Western Hemisphere. Then once that is done, it goes from Northern Hemisphere to Southern Hemisphere. This is the path of dominance. When we talk about entering into the dream spell of history, this is what is meant to be 3113 BC, or in dream spell years, minus 3187. But instead of that, the moon genesis, we have the Maya giving us the 13 Bactun map because the theft of time occurred. So basically, this is the summary of narrative that is bringing us where we are right now, which is we are, as we have been mentioning, on that 13 orbit after crossing the 13 Bactun, and that crossing of that 13 Bactun or 260 generations, or approximately 5,125 years. That cycle is called the cycle of history, of recorded history. And since 2012, we are in the post-history. Before 3113 BC, we are in the prehistory. So we are in the post-history. And right now, this post-history is arriving to that 13th orbit after of completion, like a hologram. So what we are going to see more and more, and what we are going to witness during this 52-day cycle, is a fractal of all the events that in a fractal time scale has brought us here. So we close that 13 Bactun, and since that, let's say that we are in a transformative process that is reaching now another peak, these 13 years, this other container. And that means that we are wrapping up more of the unsolved or unresolved aspects of consciousness like our disconnection from the natural time frequencies. And this is a window also to really observe what happened during this entire cycle, because we will present more as we move along this entire 52-day cycle. But there are several events within this cycle, including the Gregorian reform, including the Julian reform, that are embedded into these 52 days. So we will bring those points to memory when the time comes. And let's wrap it up so we can have our guest and really bring this to the conversation to the ground again, after going into all these galactic layers and now bringing it to Earth.
Indeed. Well, I appreciate the effort to expand our awareness and bring it to a galactic scope. But here we go with our next segment. We're really grateful for everybody tuning in, staying tuned with us. Thank you for tapping in with the Galactic Spin podcast. And yeah, we're just very grateful you're here, for sure.
Sunrise, qigong, morning yoga pose, deep inhales through the nose, heart open, armor fall off, no more coping. I'ma speak to the boss, breath of God taking in like force when the mind is lost. Body talk with the sacral, diaphragm expand, holy mackerel, living miracle. Threefold flame ignites again, pure oxygen to the brain, change the whole mainframe and the whole game like Doctor Strange. Viewing timelines, I can jump within. Here we go again, fully animated, super sane, superpowers from existence for the mission. How we living, lyrics lifted to the four directions. Here we go from the soul. Hey. Last breath, leave the body, then we go. While I'm here, I'ma breathe deep, I'ma get strong. Last breath, leave the body, then we go. While I'm here, I'ma breathe deep, I'ma get strong. Last breath, leave the body, then we go. While I'm here, I'ma breathe deep, I'ma get strong. Last breath, leave the body, there we go. While I'm here, I'ma breathe deep, I'ma get strong. Wim Hof, cold plunge, sauna. All right.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. One second. Let me go ahead and pull the volume down on my headphones. I'm loving the jam over here. I'm getting caught up in it.
Yeah, the
Brother.
sound quality is a little different when it goes live. But
Oh, yeah. Well, I want to encourage people to certainly check out your music so they can really catch the feel for it, because there's nothing like hearing it directly. But Brother Luke Kohen, honored to have you with us today, brother.
good to be here with both of you. That was
Thank
quite the journey leading up to this moment. I was like kind of in and out of meditation, tracking all the. I could see why the name of the podcast has landed for me. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And you're going to help us also land it here on the physical and the physical framework as well. So it's a little bit of the both and. So thank you for taking that journey with us, and for being available to come on and share the time space. Just a little bit, I guess, just to give the listeners some reference here. Now, you and I, we met back in, I guess we were thinking about 2011. So that was before the closing of the cycle, one of those significant aspects of the timekeeping frequency. But certainly you have been very active since I met you then. It was at a yoga festival, and I think maybe you had been performing as part of the festival at that time. I know you were presenting under a different name back in the day.
Yeah.
And so we know that as things evolve and grow, you've been evolving and growing and traveling the planet really in service, you know,
Yes.
truly. So we go back a long way. It's been a wonderful time watching you evolve as an artist, and particularly a heartist, as you say in your bio, a heartist, one coming from the heart with that sincere expression. And so just watching you bud, blossom, and bloom has been a fantastic thing. So thank you again for being here with us.
Grateful to be here. Thanks for everyone tuning in. Nice to meet you, Ruben, as well. And yeah, let's dive in.
Absolutely. So many things to tap in on. I mean, obviously, as I said, you've been traveling. You have a great website. I want to encourage people, in fact, after this interview, don't go there right now, but go to lukekohen.com, Kohen.com. Check that out when you get a chance, because access to your music is up there, and any information people may want to follow up with you about is up there. But I've noticed in terms of like you're presenting yourself, your artistry now, the Luke Kohen is like a new platform in a sense, a new way that you're presenting now. Tell me a little bit about what, when we go to the website, we see this terminology, the new narrative. So share with me what that means. Just to give us an indicator. I have a feeling it'll help us get a sense about what your frequency.
Yeah, the new narrative. I mean, you guys touched on it that a lot of these narratives are hijacking the imagination of humanity so that we dream in the sort of fallen sorcerers that have been scheming this time continuum that you guys spoke into so eloquently from your framework's perspective. So the new narrative, I would say it's the ancient future narrative. It is the regeneration, and this is a word I wanted to drop into the space as a bard tonight. When we look at regenerative culture, let's call it a regeneration. So it's not just the rejuvenation of Mother Earth and new systems of commerce. It's also time is art, right? So this is a mimetic phrase that I think is really important. It carries a resonance, the regeneration. So the new narrative is the regeneration. It's the reacclimating to our multidimensional soul selves beyond the formulated identities that we inherited both from culture, society, and our family trauma. And so when we re-individuate out of the collective programming as the signatures that we are, we can bring our piece to the narrative. And so the new narrative is what we created. It's our co-dreaming, right? And that's something that we each came here to this planet seeded with a piece of that puzzle, no greater, no less than, but just our unique piece to carry to that fabric of that emergent paradigm. And so the new narrative is, is pretty much opposite of anything colonial based or Gregorian based or dogmatic based. The new narrative is synced with our true origins and our true essence as spiritual beings. So we get to jump into this space-time experience, but we are beyond the linearity of it. And so as we reorient ourselves, we get the opportunity to co-dream an experience that is anchored in organic time. That's the new narrative. In meeting you guys in your framework, I share it differently, obviously in other contexts, but I felt like staying
Well,
on subject.
oh, thank you for that reflection. Regeneissance.
hmm
Yeah,
hmm
love that. Let's make a
Yeah.
note of that in the chat, y'all. That's a good
Yeah.
one. That's a quotable. Luke Kohen, Regeneissance. Renaissance. Love that one for sure.
Yeah, shout
And
out to my friend Nico, who's part of coining that. We jammed a bit on that.
okay,
Yeah,
Nice.
shout out to Nico in Mexico City.
okay,
Yeah,
all right. Big up
yeah.
Nico. And so now I know you arrived in New York City. When I say you arrived, meaning you were born in New York City,
I
right?
did. I arrived there,
You arrived in New York
right
City,
in the heart of
right in the heart of
it.
the city. Um, and so I'm curious always to learn this about others as well. What was the first memory you recall where you recalled that you were here for the purpose?
uh, so I remember my birth,
Hmm.
and I remember being like looking around. So I didn't cry. I just kind of looked around, and I saw my dad, and I recognized his signature, and I was like, all right, well, if you're here, I think I'll be all right. That was my sort of earliest memory, and that wasn't right away. This was like a recall that came later on, so it wasn't retained; it
Okay,
was remembered,
recalled.
but
Yeah.
I fully accessed it. Yeah, and
Hmm.
and in terms of I had glimmers as an old soul throughout my incarnation of being like, I remember waking up from a nap on the FDR Drive and the Brooklyn Bridge and the Manhattan, that whole double bridge, little section. And I'm like getting up from a nap in the back of the car and I'm like, what civilization did I incarnate into? Like, where am I? Literally that was the thought form, was what civilization did I incarnate into? And
Wow.
so I've had these little flashes throughout my childhood.
Hmm.
Obviously, growing up in a paradigm of New York City and the kind of culture we come up, a lot of us come up in, we have to armor up our softness, our empathy, our psychic abilities, all that. So all that was very online as a kid and started to shut down probably around 5. And so I remember having still these very distinct moments of awareness and cognitions from my soul in the dream, being like, oh, this is like aware of impermanence at like 4, like the visceral awareness of impermanence, and being like being on somewhere again in Manhattan, being like, this shit is not going to last. Like, what is this? This is not, yeah, this is impermanent. And why is there so much emphasis on this fashion or this thing, which is like, yeah, so temporal. So those are like the first little glimmers of soul remembrance that I had, and often would even call out distortion in the adults around me until, bigger bodies, obviously will shame a smaller body when they're called out on their distortions. And so I kind of gradually withdrew into more of my imagination than speaking what I was seeing in the psychic spiritual dimensions that I had access to up until 5. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, kind of saying, we'll let you figure that out on your own.
Yeah.
So you're not ready for me to impart what I'm seeing,
Yes,
maybe.
yes.
At
I
this.
would literally be like, "Oh, he's lying. That's not true." And they would like, freak out. Like, and kids do it. Like
Mm. They
it's
tell you
not
the truth.
special to me. They
Right.
just speak truth. We
Exactly.
call them the young elders for a reason, right? They're still more tethered to that spirit world.
Really and truly. I want to invite Ruben to share, because one thing we recognize, we didn't know this going into the invitation to have you on the episode. I love it when this happens, but you happen to be kin 160, the yellow
Mm-hmm.
self-existing sun.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very particular kin out of the 260, because it literally shows up as the golden proportion of the Zolkin calendar, what we were showing earlier. It's literally at the golden proportion of that calendar. I wanted to mention that to Ruben and invite him to maybe offer some reflection, because he's one who's helped me see the significances of the golden ratio, for example, because you happen to hold that number in your galactic signature.
Cool.
Yes. Yes. Well, since I was a kid, I was always attracted by geometries and proportion in the human body, and so I became a big fan of the method that the Renaissance artists, now that we are speaking about regeneration, well, I love the word also. The way that these artists were conceiving their compositions in their minds, and using the golden ratio in all these compositions, and how they are expressing an innate beauty. So in the same way that we can measure that golden proportion in the fabric of space, we can measure the golden proportion in the fabric of time. And in doing that experiment, well, I started just to go deeper, because in one of the authors that we also showcase here is John Major Jenkins, who is no longer with us. He's part of the group of minds that put the date December 21st, 2012 on the map. He is attributed to really have really discovered the Maya cosmogenesis, or the galactic alignment that was happening during the summer, during the winter solstice in 2012. And he, in one of his books, he says that the one of the main properties of the Solkin is that it holds that sacred proportion, and it goes into the mathematics of it, and it's because if we divide 160, which is your kin, between 100, we get 1.6, which is basically the approximation of the golden ratio.
Mm.
So basically, in the Solkin matrix, you will see 13 rows of 20 days each, and if we've split those 13 columns in 1/8 and 1/5, which is the two golden sections of that 13 stage, well, we get to kin 160, and then kin 260 would be the completion of that.
Okay.
So you are basically at the sweet spot of the Solkin where the magic happens, and that in the long count for those who are new, well, like there are two counts. One that we call the Galactic Maya count, and one is the ancient Maya count. The ancient Maya is the way that the indigenous peoples of that area of Mexico and Mesoamerica have been tracking time, and left their stelas and their codices with those signatures, and yours happens to be also in their system, the start and the end day of the entire cycle of 5,125 years of or 5,200 tun. So that particular point or day for a how or for sun or kin 160, there are different ways that we can approach it, but it's a fractal quality that we are talking about. It's that golden proportion, is that point of balance in any composition, is that particular kin within the Solkins, and that happened to be on that large scale of evolution of that map of time of 260 generations that Jose Arguelles presented in the Mayan Factor. That happened to be also the 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 generation of the birth of Christ, or the year zero, within that timeline.
Yes.
So it's associated with the Christ consciousness, is associated with evolution, is associated with a portal that we go through to enter the next stage. So that golden ratio is like a little eye of the needle, like Makua was speaking today. We are approaching that eye of the needle this year in terms of the mathematics of the not only the long count of the ancient Maya long count, but also the mathematics of the Gregorian calendar and the Galactic Maya count. So thank you so much for being who you are, and being an expression of that beauty and balance in nature.
I mean, it's amazing to me. It's it's just an example of time as art. You know, the fact that you chose your incarnation to come through with that signature, like, and getting back to this concept of free will, we each make that choice because we each have a prescribed purpose or mission to fulfill.
Yeah.
Should we be fortunate enough to remember that we have a mission to fulfill, because it's
Right.
a blessing to remember.
It
So
is.
in light of that, I mean, you chose to come in at that sweet spot of timing, we might say, and to illustrate what Ruben is saying. I mean, again, that signature, that for a how, codes the beginning and the completion of a 5,125 year window, or 5,200 tune. So that's no small thing. And it is effectively also, when you look at the mapping of that 260 kin as an overlay of the cycles of history, as he was indicating, the fact that it shows up there with the birth of Christ. I mean, again, that's a very interesting portal through which to fractalize oneself. And so, in light of that sort of signature or that frequency match, that carries across timelines, obviously.
Sure.
So you're part of, I would suggest, part of a harmonic sort of dream team, effectively, that has been sent here again to anchor and stabilize certain things. Even though we got to go and navigate the humanness of the entire situation, that's a
Right.
part of it, because
Sure.
you can't know how to serve if you don't have the contrast of needing, you know, certain yourself, right? It's like the dynamic of knowing through direct exposure and experience, which we've invariably exposed ourselves to, though we also have come in with the medicine to heal ourselves. And so part of your journey in reading your story, getting to know a bit more about that, it's evident that you've gone through the varying layers of that hero's journey to be able to bring that medicine back to the community, in a sense. That's what I'm picking up on. And I want to turn a little bit toward, I know I mentioned before I met you and you were formerly performing under a different name time as a hip hop artist, right?
Yeah. So I received the name Alokananda in India in 2007 on a pilgrimage early in my seeking phase of the journey. And that was, and Ram Dass talks about this too. When we take a Sanskrit name or we take sannyas and we receive a spiritual name, the intention is to move the identification from the personality or the ego to the soul. And I received this name in a very auspicious way through a really beautiful soul connection in my life that I'm still deeply connected to. So my mom's best friend's daughter was in a Himalayan cave under the tutelage of her guru when I was reading Autobiography of a Yogi early after my healing crisis and early awakening in my last year of university. So as I'm discovering this whole universe of mysticism at the next level through a direct transmission, she's actually in this cave. And so when I end up leaving to go to India eventually, we get in contact, and it's her guru who I meet, and I spend 2 days with this beautiful man, very humble householder sort of teacher, Satguru, not Satguru as we know, but it's a term that we use for a true teacher, a true one that can give a transmission of energy, a darshan, if you will. And after 2 days, he gave me the name Alok, which is light. Ananda is bliss. Alokananda, but Luke also means light. Lok. And so I was like, "Are you giving me a name?" He's like, "Be happy. Go be the light of bliss that you are." So it's sort of associated with the healing, shamanic healing side of Lord Shiva that I came to understand. And then I had a medicine auntie who is very versed in multicultures, and she said, "You are a divine location. You are a loka, a realm, a world of Ananda, of bliss." So she interpreted my name a little differently. And I walked with that name for 12 years. And in tribe or in community at the time, people knew me as Aloka, which confused my Spanish-speaking friends at the time. When I told people in South America and Central America, Latin America, my name was Aloka, they would kind of turn their head sideways a little bit, like, "That's your name?" So I would say Alokananda when I was in Central America to avoid that, but amongst the tribe, people knew me as Aloka, and I went through a big transformation of name, and right, and name is a signature, like as we know. So for me, actually funny, when I reconnected with Mikuak, it was at Nexus in 2018. We hadn't seen each other for a number of years, and when I was there, and I introduced myself as Aloka to many of these like celebrity politician people, they also got the little head tilted to the side, and I was sitting in this auditorium in Nexus watching these TEDx style speaking, and I dropped into meditation, and my guys were like, "You need to go back to Luke if you want to reach a wider audience. You're going to limit your audience if you are Lokananda." So it was just one seed planted, and I had already gone through this other seed planted from a dear brother of mine who's a Native American teacher, and we were doing prayer a lot together during Standing Rock. So we both kept asking for permission to go, and we never got a clear yes from Spirit to go to Standing Rock. So we would do these prayer calls every Friday. And one day he asked me to call on my grandparents, and he's like, "You carry a lodge, brother. How are you? You don't know your grandparents' names." I'm like, classic story, like many, Euro-based bodies, when we come, immigrated here and lost connection with our ancestral line. So I started to go on this investigation. I have these conversations with my mom and start finding out more about my lineage, and that my grandfather was adopted, and he was a Kohen, and Cohens are high priests, and then my Italian side, which fought against Mussolini in the hills, and my great grandma was a homeopath in Italy, and then my Irish side, and I start tapping into the Druids and the Celtic side. So I started to go on this ancestral journey out of the sort of beautiful, I feel very honored to have been adopted by a lot of beautiful uncles and aunties in
the traditional lineages of the First Nations peoples and learn protocols and songs, but it was an invitation to start to get in touch with my own DNA's path. And so in that investigation, from that sort of opening in Standing Rock, that experience at Nexus, I began to go on this new transformation of moving back from Alokananda to Luke, which was really a return to my humanity. So you talked about this little contrast of we have this galactic mission, and Aloka was very much, galactic. And Alokananda was my mystery school, and I did a lot of, amazing healing work and ceremony work and activism under that moniker. And that came to a close that same year, 2018, where I hit a kind of, I would say, a type of activism burnout, doing a systems change event with 200 people and a lot of elders and teachers from Standing Rock and systems change people, and brought together these different groups under one context in New Mexico at one of the oldest eco villages to try to create a shift of culture on the planet. So that was the death of Aloka and the beginning of returning to Luke Kohen and the return of the Bard.
So tell us about that, the Bard. I mean, I know you mentioned you went into the ancestral journey, and I would imagine as part of that journey, you recovered that dimension of
Yep.
yourself, perhaps ancestrally, maybe former lifetimes. Talk a little bit
A little
about
bit of
the
both.
Bard.
A little bit of both. Yeah. So this is a cool story because it ties into the framework that you guys are so deeply versed in, which is artificial. How artificial time came, and as I understand it, through my lineage on the Irish side, and that part being reclaimed both on a soul level, but also in my DNA. The Malivi clan. I have Scottish and Irish and Welsh. Very little bit of Welsh. So I did a pilgrimage last year where I was in these places. I went to Ireland and I went to Glastonbury and these very special places of the Druids that have been, pilgrimage sites and stone circles for thousands and thousands of years. But the Bard and the mythos and the archetype of the Bard is that journey of coming back to Luke. I was being entrained gradually with that narrative. So I was first introduced to that narrative from like the medieval context of like a traveling storyteller that would go from kingdom to kingdom to bring the good news, and they would get sort of patroned by a wealthy house, sing a song about our the goodness of our house on your travels, and they would do their one obligatory song, and oh, those in the South are great and, noble. And then they would share their mystic transmissions and their adventures of, nearly getting killed and robbed in the forest, but then, singing a song to these bandits and winning their hearts, because whatever, they would do their thing. And people at that time, it's a very cool metaphor because people lived sheltered in kingdoms. They wouldn't leave the walls of the castle grounds and those grounds because they can get killed and robbed in the forest going to another kingdom. So they stayed behind that sheltered wall. So when a bard came, it was like news from the outside world, like, and it's a really fun and entertaining and deep, experience, right? And so that was my orientation to the bards. So I got brought deeper and deeper, and then I found out that the bards were in the Druid tradition. It comes from Celtic mythology, and when the Romans were waging their war campaign on first the Germanic tribes of Europe, and then eventually to the lands of the Druids, which were way more than just Ireland, by the way. This is vast. There's if you dig deeper into that mythology, is what I love about Irish mythology and Celtic mythology. It goes like it crosses this veil of linearity into pure myth, where like Atlantis is involved and like the Toa de Danann, which are like these elf galactic beings that have these like sigils and sacred objects that they like imbued the Irish culture with, which were they were non-human beings seeding this like civilizational context, right? So there's all this crazy mythology that I started to dive into over the last few years. But to come to the bard part, when the Romans were waging their war campaign, they came to Ireland. They faced the fiercest tribe that they had yet faced, and what they noticed, and the frontline warriors would get this surge of power, getting the strength of 10 men. And they saw a group of beings at the back line with their drums singing ancestral songs, and those were the bards. So the first thing they did was wage an assassination campaign on the bards. That was their first entry of conquering the Druid nations in Ireland. And so I had a near-death experience in Bali at the beginning of COVID, where I had been gradually making the transition to Luke from Aloka or Lokananda, very slowly but surely. And when I had arrived at that point, I was Luke for the most part, introducing myself as such, and had been in this experiment since the death of Aloka in 2018 and integrating that. And now, it's a 2-year span of initiations that were happening. So I arrived, I had this near-death experience, and I come back, and there was a very big shift in my consciousness from this near. Like I died from dengue, basically. I left my body for a minute and a half. A lot of people ask me, well, what was that like? I was just gone. And then next thing I know, I was traveling back down on a golden DMT light bridge is the only way that I can explain it. Had my one experience with that medicine. It's enough for this lifetime. And so when I was coming back, I had no fear, and it felt like a golden kind of Christ energy was pouring into me. And my partner at the time was freaked out, obviously, because I was gone. I just left, And so I was like, call an ambulance, and I spent this whole week in the hospital in this kind of shamanic journey as COVID was sweeping the planet. And it's like very intense. And then in the integration of that experience, because you enter a very non-dual state, because you leave the hologram and then you come back in. It's kind of like unplugging the Wi-Fi and then plugging back in, and the signal's stronger. So I was very connected, and whatever veils were left were completely gone after this experience for me. And I was trying to integrate back into my humanity, and it was very challenging. I accessed a feeling of gratitude through a fellow high priest brother of mine who I've seen through initiations and seen me through initiations. And I was like, what's the point of being here? It was like my question, because I was so disillusioned by identity and everything that, that had gone on from that near-death experience. And what came to me was, oh, we're here for each other. Like that team that you're talking about, that those of us that are here to hold the frequency, we're here for each other. And we need kinship to hold the field. And when I felt that, things just started to move through, and I felt everything integrating, and my guides came back to me and they said, by the way, your mystical hiatus is over, because I had not worked for 2 years. I was in this free fall experiment of not doing anything for money and letting life self-organize to take care of me in that 2-year window from when Aloka died to when Luke came back from this near-death experience. And my guides were like, you need to start doing healing work with leaders again. And by the way, you're a bard. If you're confused because you're so transpersonal, let's give you an archetype to anchor yourself. And so I began to rebrand and come out and start to do the storytelling. And the next phase of the story of the bard, I found out that bards had to train for 20 years worth of initiations before they were allowed to give a transmission to the tribe and to the people through song, sound, and poetry. And so that moniker of Return of the Bard came with Luke Kohen as I integrated that near-death experience and that transmission from spirit. Yeah.
Wow. What a journey, brother.
Uh-huh.
What a journey. I mean, the journey continues, obviously.
Oh, yes.
So what's some amazing stepping stones to the present? Let me ask you this then, through the lens of the bard, as it were, what's most alive right now in terms of a message to share with let's just say the global community? I mean, maybe not local specific, but just with the global community right now. What is the bard's message?
It is imperative that we decondition all outdated programming to be the points of light that we were meant to be in this time. We have a 2-year window to shift culture on the planet, and your divine mission is very important. And there are barriers to our divine missions if we allow the indoctrination programs to exploit our trauma. So it is very important to commit completely and wholeheartedly from your soul to resolving any residual trauma so that you can be the clear beacon that you came here to be, and to let the mind ideas and strategies about how the evolution of consciousness is supposed to look like and enter into the lived experience of that as a discovery and an exploration, with maintaining an awareness and a witnessing consciousness of the nature of mind, so that we are not caught in the miasma of time and entrenched and distracted and harvested of our attention into those old narratives that are coming to the surface to be so apparent and so contrasting that we choose that golden timeline that we know is possible in our heart of hearts, that more beautiful world that we all know is possible. So our role within that, We have to do our individual role as the collective is purifying right now, as we're seeing these fires and all these New World agendas and all the things that many people are aware of in the conspiratorial realms, in the galactic realm, all the people that are on a spiritual journey are aware of these things. Stop giving your attention to it in a certain way. Be aware, but not beware, right? Leave the fear and come into your deep, deep, deep faith in what is happening, even if you can't understand it in the moment. And it's so important in the coming times that people learn how to grieve effectively, and that they have coherence in community, and that they have the opportunity to really value and honor their humanity. So yes, we are galactic beings, and yes, tremendous cities are available to us and mystical experiences, but it's time to ground. This is the wood snake year, is bringing it down to earth, humbly shedding any final layers of identity that are not the truth of our signature, and not trying to set up shop at some fixed point of identity. It's the biggest trap in spiritual community and spirituality, is thinking that we have arrived. We're ever unfolding, ever blossoming, ever revealing, ever discovering, and the importance of doing shadow work and being humble with our relations to see where our blind spots are in community, because the Buddha is the Sangha now. We have to do the work of seeing our fellow kin and the reflections that they bring, and that 0-point chief prophecy of each person's unique vantage point of the totem pole of truth in the center that we make up in these pods of 13. 13th being the center, 12 around it. So it's the 12 is important, but it's the 12 in relationship to the 13th. So it's like a mono atomic pole. It's the 0-point technology, and to get out of this endless miasma of endless clearing, endless fighting, endless struggle. And yes, there are going to be challenges, and yes, we're going to feel pain, and yes, we're going to have to grieve and let beloveds go that are transitioning the spirit world, and we're going to see, very catastrophic events, but underneath that there's a coherent field emerging that we already have access to right now if we learn to attune to it. And that's where we need to anchor our consciousness. Despite what's happening in the physical world, in our relationships, we have to stay rooted in that deep attunement to that frequency.
Mm, 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 mm. Beautifully said.
Yeah, and I want to add that Luke is self-existing tone, which is the tone of form. So it's a full embodiment of light, which
Mm,
is life, or universal fire is the qualities of the sun. So this is a really amazing example of how the galactic codes work the individual to become that embodiment or that vessel, that container, in your case being that giving form to the light,
mm,
which is the life force of the sun.
mm, mm. Yes.
And part of coming into form, and as we do that as a collective, of bringing our projects, our visions, our medicine, our art, our great work into form, is the commitment to fully being here. And a lot of star-seeded, empathic, hyper-creative, very multidimensional, sensitive beings, we can often feel like it's hard to be here. And the journey of recommitting to being here fully, despite how the world appears, that is a big piece. And so how to build safety in the nervous system, how to find safety amidst this stuff, because a lot of us have been killed for being mystics in past lives. A lot of us have been persecuted in some form. We're all carrying some signature of colonial trauma, whether it is in this incarnation or down through our ancestral lines. I would say Rome conquering the Druids is a form of colonization. In other forms, it shows up in other, in the last 500 years, it looks differently, but it's that same pattern of when we moved from galactic heart-centered Christed beings without this concept of a sort of separate self into a linear separate self that is then, being gradually entrained into power over and different dynamics that come from that Babylonian world. And so that can express across cultures, and we need to collapse the sort of duality around what decolonizing consciousness actually looks like for each of us in our own unique journey of that through our lineages. And that's going to look different for someone that has Arawak or Inuit or Lakota or Polish, whatever your ancestral line is, your version of decolonizing consciousness and indoctrination is going to look different. But we all have a sacred responsibility to do our own version of that work. And it's so unique to every individual, our what we inherit and what we get to transmute. And that transmutation process, that trauma and those ego structures and those identity structures, we could say, is like the scaffolding that becomes the temple. And we can sometimes judge our healing process. We can sometimes want to throw stones at the scaffolding and make it bad and wrong because we know it's not us, and yet it's the framework we need to evolve through. It's designed. It's divinely designed, and this whole setup that we're seeing, the duality of this external world that's a reflection of us. That scaffolding is in a huge transmutative process right now to become the temple, to become the mirror of soul again, to become the mirror of the liminal homoluminous version of our potential that we're living into, and all the attempts to stifle it, all the agendas that are trying to steer us into that artificial transhumanist, all the things that we're aware of, all the potential dark timelines that we see, only speeds up our evolution if we do our work. If we allow the medicine of the transmutation process to actually catalyze and be its benevolent force as we meet it, because that's that dynamic friction of the power over structures revealing themselves, and the fear and the trauma it touches in all our nervous systems gets us to get into the alchemy of it, to rise out of it, to be able to like really see it for what it is and meet it from that undifferentiated awareness, from that Christed, Sophic, Gaiac, timeless aspect of our beings, and to hold it from that space.
So it sounds to me like it serves as a catalyst in this process. So something for us not to run from, but to truly be catalyzed by, that we can really endeavor.
To know that it's serving us, even though it can feel like the opposite, that it's happening for us, even though it's horrific at times. I mean, if we look at what's happening in Congo, we know what's been going on in the Middle East the last years. All these places where there's these bubbles in some areas of the world where it's literally a framework that creates a blockage to the awareness of the collective whole. And so people live inside that bubble, inside of their contrived reality, and with unattunement to the rest of humanity. And yet these things are in this weird space-time experience. There's national karma, there's individual karma, there's karmic purification. And in the stage of the prophecy that we're in is the stage of purification. Many in the sort of galactic community are very excited for the renewal stage. What comes post Rising Phoenix. And if we're going to go into human design language, we're entering the Rising Phoenix in 2027. I'm sure there's cool overlap. We should geek on that a little bit. I would love to see the overlap within the kin system, the galactic signature system, Mayan calendar and Aztec calendars, and all the beautiful ancient First Nation, pre-Babylon frameworks that help us orient to true time and organic time, because there's many. What 2027 actually is for the collective and why we have a 2-year window. So anyway.
Yeah, you're definitely opening something there. I mean, we've definitely tapped into that in the past couple of episodes here, because we're tracking that 2027 concurrent timeline in one sense through the lens of the pulse calendar and what Richard Rudd characterizes as this mutation of the species. It's also characterized through the human design system as well. The solar plexus is mutating. And so as that's happening within humanity, that according to the gene keys, there is a gene key called gene key 55 that is universal to the human species, and it's coming online for each of us in this window, this 2-year window you're speaking about.
Synarchy. As well.
Yes, precisely.
And that process of synarchy takes us all doing our individual work and individuating out of collective consciousness, collapsing the power over competitive paradigms. And I think this is part of the intention of the podcast, is how do we move into that regeneissance through collaboration? That synergy of that process of that 0 point chief prophecy of how we move in coherent groups during the purification stage will determine the emergent culture that's on the other side when we go into the renewal phase. So we're not in the renewal phase, but many are carrying the renewal blueprints and are very impatient with being able to implement them. But and they've already started implementing. I mean, what happened to harmonic convergence on Haleakala in Hawaii with Makasha and all the elders that have been carrying this for the last the first wave, each wave making it easier for the next wave to integrate what has been trailblazed through the morphogenetic field. Each thing that we heal and sets the new synapse line, the new neural pathway is there for us to follow, right? And so there are those that have anchored renewal seeds that are sprouting now, but as a whole, we're not in the renewal phase. It's happening in these microcosms in these particular areas, and a lot of the areas that this is happening is where some of these sort of agendas are like smashing first. Like Asheville and the hurricanes, major hub for renewal. Regenerative culture, yeah, all that kind of stuff. But again, when it happens, it actually speeds up the timeline where those things actually need to be implemented now. Like once there's a natural disaster, the conversation about building with hemp and cob and how we self-organize as a community, like all the concepts of that go out the window, and then you're actually in relationship with what's happening, right? So it actually speeds that up. And so for those of you listening, wherever you are in the world, where you might be on that smart city map, this is the time to get into the next sacred urgency of coherence with your community and implementing the renewal technology now ahead of time for when that purification wave comes through your neighborhood to catalyze what actually matters and what's actually sacred in this time. And we can have that like contrast of being smacked by the material world and enough to kind of get us to prioritize how we need to orient beyond our identities and like actually be in relationship with our land and our food and our water and each other and all the things that really, 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 really matter. And it's a really beautiful wake-up call that's hard for the personality and for the ego structure, but is essential for the soul to step into its form work in the renewal phase.
You're talking about the purification wave. It's very interesting because we're here now in the 13-day cycle that's actually coded by the quality of purification. It's the red moon 13-day cycle. Now, we could say that as a fractal that could be applied to 13 weeks or 13 years if you choose. But the fact is, it's the container for this purification wave that you're speaking of. It's happening. We're all witnessing it in various ways. And I agree. I think there's a lot of it is the impetus for us to go within, to do that unattended work, to be gentle with ourselves, gentle with others, but also insistent and holding ourselves accountable to do that work and make the pole shift that we necessarily need to make as individuals, while the planet's also being guided to shift by the sun on its axis. Very
many factors. Many factors.
I think the factors are occurring in such an orchestration that, as you said, if you're endeavoring to go in and do the work, it's almost like a shuttle supporting you to do that. Whereas if you're not actually endeavoring to do the work and you're more oriented to the external and looking and seeing what's going on, it may come as a bit more of a rude awakening for you to go in and attend to the work. So it's kind of like, we have the choice and we have the invitation, but now you also mentioned there's a sacred urgency about it, because we don't have the luxury of an expanded amount of time to get
right. We can take for granted with the comforts of the Western world the sacred urgency. When you get Amazon to deliver stuff to your door, you're like, evolution's gradually happening, but it's a little bit different. For example, like I'm on the evacuation route. Like I left LA 3 weeks ago because of the fires, right? And this was my 8th sort of natural disaster zone that I've been intimately connected to. And I was able to hold a calm nervous system amidst all of it and be very aware of what was happening and ride my individual, tribal, and collective waves as I have that in my human design as an emotional being. I ride all 3 waves, and I could really feel what was happening in like the immediate tribe with many people that lost their houses. My current partner had her whole apartment, like all these things. And yet, because of their practice, it was like Swaha. Okay, what's next?
Wow.
Redirection. You know, whereas like, you know, that's happened to me in 2017. I lost 95% of my possessions in the Ojai Thomas fires when I was on Maui. Just
Wow.
swaha. No GoFundMe, no insurance. Just okay. Thank you, Chumash ancestors, for allowing me that time in my life to be on the lands in Ojai, and here's the sacrifice. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
trust life, right? Come back into that surrender. So, you know, the getting out of the comfort, that catalyzing energy is, we get to pray for it to be not be a 2x4. Like, we can have more grace, you know. So the lessons are coming for most in one form or another, and that self accountability is a better concept than a lived reality until we cross a certain threshold of commitment. And life will bring it to us again and again and again until we choose with all of our being, you know. Yeah.
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 Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Two other initiated men going,
Exactly. So let me ask you this. I mean, I know you've had the chance to tap in with emerging communities and clusters in various places, whether it's in Hawaii or in Ojai, as you mentioned. That is another one such zone on the planet. Um, I mean, obviously, you recently being in Topanga and having to evacuate from there. I know that there are some clusters of emergent energy in all these spaces. And
Yeah.
also, you spent some significant time in Bali as well as Costa Rica. So, among all these places where I know you're tapping in, and it's your inherent way shower bardic energy with the transmission, whether you were calling yourself a bard at that time or not, I know that energy has been guiding you in any case. So, in light of that, what do you? Because you're also indicating that perhaps we're not yet at the level of like um, diving into the new expression of what that may look like, because there's still preemptive work that needs to be done. We need to take advantage of the timing, this 2-year window, as you said, to really dig deep in that. Where in these communities, where is that level of recognition of that need? Uh, is there a recognition or coming to terms in these spaces of intentional community,
I think
or is
there's
there resistance?
more. I
Is
think
there a
there's
doubt about it or something?
yeah. I hear what you're saying. Thank you. I think that there's more ideation and idealism than reality in the majority of these communities. Unfortunately, I see more of the real thing in indigenous communities and in more diverse communities. It's part of why I've left a lot of these circles, because there's not enough diversity of expression and practice, and the echo chamber of privilege is quite strong in these areas. And you know, don't get me wrong, there's beauty there, and a lot of these beings are very multidimensional awake, but they're still caught up in the colonial paradigm to the point where there's a lot of unconscious agenda still at work, and self-aggrandizement and hyper individualism. That you know, capitalism, unfortunately, in its colonial form, breeds narcissism. So there's a lot of spiritual narcissism in these communities, and it's just, again, it's a stage of the scaffolding. That scaffolding will come off, and the true temple will emerge beyond the identity of those spiritual narcissistic patterns. I've had to live through that myself. I had, you know, my narcissistic blind spots that I had to alchemize and really look at, where I was cut off from my own humanity or defending wounds in certain ways, and where I was in a self-preservation phase, because it's not bad or wrong. We have a lot of psychological terms around this. It gets thrown out around there a lot, of like, you know, what a narcissist is and what narcissism is. So most human beings have a blind spot of narcissism. And that's simply a coping strategy. And so it shows up very uniquely in the spiritual community than like in the mass consciousness. It's much more nuanced, because the ego has that many more special words and tools and ways to avoid its self-responsibility than in like the mainstream consciousness. But it's still a signature. And I see it as a phase of the purification. Like, a lot of these communities are going to have to face, and whatever form that catalyst is going to come to address that narcissism is going to come one way or another. And on the other side of that, then we can actually be in non-transactional, very deeply coherent, soul-based, undefended, non-agenda, but really deeply listening from an attuned space kind of relationships. And so what I will say is that there are individuals in all of these communities that are doing that work. There are individuals amidst the tribal context of that sort of neo-colonial distortion that are doing and valuing this work, and we are finding each other, and there is another fractal of coherence at the next level that is slowly being woven, that are coming into terms with this sort of process. A lot of my friends that I've stayed in touch with over 10 years, they're coming to these realizations on their own. They're like, wow, yeah, I was living in this blind spot of narcissism the last chapter of my spiritual journey, and I was hiding behind this mask. I was hiding behind ayahuasca, or I was hiding behind Vedanta, or I was hiding behind whatever it is that we hide behind, and having to come into relationship. And it's usually through relationships, breakups, partners, people that can reflect the parts of ourselves that we can't see, and we can very magically hide behind in so many ways and bedazzle, but at some point have to reconcile where we haven't done our work. And when those walls and those mechanisms get alchemized, then the profound capacity for coherence can emerge, and that the seeds of that are happening. And there are pockets of it again, but I see it more in communities that have had relationship with land already through generations. They've been living it. They haven't stopped living it. So, I would recommend to those that are really, into this kind of work, to go spend time with, First Nations and tribal people, specifically the Kogi or the Wadadika, or any of the tribal beings that weren't colonized, that have that direct experience, connection with the fire in pre-colonial time or organic time, to be in their field and be in that awareness. And once there's like a threshold of that awareness of what nonlinear time feels like in the body, and to feel that aspect, then we can bring that back into tribe, and then we can bring back the space and do the talking circles, and do the conflict resolution, and do the messy human working our shit out, our family stuff, our whatever, so that we can arrive as souls in council to attune to that 0.13th seat of spirit in the space.
Oh.
Well, I love and resonate with that vision. And I mean, it's one who is in a relationship with a partner who holds me accountable all the time. Shout out to Ishel. She does not let me delude myself, even in the most minor things. And
Yeah.
sometimes, it can be aggravating. I mean, we're in full transparency here, but that's a part of it. And yet I'm so grateful, because it's ensuring that I'm meeting the moment with my best self.
Right.
And where I left to my own devices, I can't necessarily guarantee that would be happening, or certainly not maybe as quickly as it seems to be happening, because that partnership, I mean, of course, it's a mirror. You're holding it there. It's always reflective and giving you the opportunity to come to terms. And so I can definitely appreciate that perspective you're providing, in terms of kind of tapping in these various zones where we're all working through a similar process. We're all working through it.
Myself included.
Yeah. Now, also,
Major.
another interesting reflection that we can take heart in knowing is that while we're going through this transition, that's also catalyzed through great conflict, the Earth is also realizing it's what's been termed its noospheric layer, but that layer cannot be actuated without conflict, without the contrast. So all the things that we're seeing as examples of contrast and conflict on the Earth over the past century, for example, have been serving to exact that acceleration curve for the planet attaining its noosphere. And that's an interesting parallel to sort of recognize that we're all being called to that acceleration, or to vibrate higher perhaps, or to stand in the confidence of our consciousness of what we know to be true. And there's also this wave coming across now, as being reminded to take care of ourselves, just as Earth is being reminded to take care of itself.
You can't have a regenerative culture on burnout.
No, exactly.
The burnout is part of the colonial paradigm of needing to do more, push. And there's times, like people purify in different ways. Some people go on the mountain and they fast and they do a vision quest. Other people, there's times to push ourselves so that we move past the threshold of unconscious resistance or attachment or whatever, and that will emerge. But overall, we get the opportunity. We have the opportunity to still our nervous system more and more and more, so that we're really moving from right action and attunement to that organic time, because organic time is in harmony with the nervous system. There's no stress or tension in the body when we access that space. There's a complete relaxation of tension that happens in the nervous system when we're attuning to that infinite backdrop that we all come from. And so if we're not able to relax our nervous system fully, then and self-regulate, there's something to explore and unravel in order to take actions from that still place. Right. And this is also in human design. We have the spleen, which is the instinct channel, which is reaction. We have the sacral, which is to respond, which is just sacral, yes, no, in the body. And then we have the emotional center, which is to relate. And we're all cycling through those three sort of ways of relating, whether we have definition in there or not, how we are, literally relating with others in our environments all the time.
Yeah.
And so some people are in reaction and they're being exploited in their trauma bodies, and their reactionary state is being siphoned and funneled in a very particular pocket of consciousness that is so far from the human divine potential. It's very much an egregore of a kind of trap of energy that will siphon people into if they're in reaction. And then the ability to respond we start to zoom out a little bit, and we see, oh, I'm about to go into reaction. Now I get to choose to respond. And the next evolution is I get to relate. I'm not in reaction. I'm conscious that I'm responding. And now I bring forth my self-regulated nervous system to be in relationship with what's happening. That's the mature spiritual adult that's in charge. And that's a process of getting there. We have to reparent the inner child and all the things that we've experienced in order to do that. It's an ongoing journey. It's not about the perfectionism of that. It's about the opportunity to come back again and again and again and again and do that over and over and over again until we can sustain higher consciousness through the embodiment of self-regulation and alchemizing all these facets of whatever our work is, wherever our woundology is.
Wow. The regeneissance is real, y'all. The regeneissance is real. Luke Kohen, 160. So check this out then. One thing I want to ensure that you're conscious of as we're sharing this space together is that when we do arrive to what we've heard us call the golden intersection of timelines, it's actually holding the frequency of your 160. So October 14th, in other words, 2025, reflects the 4 Ahau, or 160, in the traditional Maya long count. And that matters because here you are as a frequency holder, and although that's a reflection from your Galactic Maya future self signature, it's aligning in divine time at the golden intersection, literally at the point of the golden intersection with the traditional Maya frequency as well. Now, those alignments are also intersecting with then the fractal golden ratio expression of the Gregorian calendar itself. So as we talk about decolonizing a thing, I get the sense that by making all of this conscious, by endeavoring to do this together through our various approaches, we're reaching a synergistic center in a major way that's being benefited by all of our mutual medicine coming together. And it's up-leveling the entire holographic structure that we've become encumbered by to the point where now we're actually impacting it and blasting it from inside out. And it's a golden energy. It's a golden light. It's going to be such a I don't know, an exchange. It's hard to put into words, frankly, but we're all experiencing it in various ways. And I'm identifying that you are holding as an embodiment, you are a frequency bearer of that very unique node. And I say it's unique because it will never happen, but only once. So the fact that we're even as a human family aware of this upcoming event this October, it'll never happen again. It's literally, I said earlier, and I have a needle, kind of moment, but the only way to make it through that moment is to be light, literally to be light as a feather, according to the Mayat, allegory, but truly light.
Right.
It's time to be that light. Now, in saying that, obviously, I'm not saying don't be in your body. This is a time to re-spiritualize the body like you've never
Yes.
considered possible,
Right.
because that's another thing that shows up in the frequency of the timing of these things. Is there is something called the spiral density wave we've been tracking, that was introduced by Dr. Jose Arguelles as a cycle of 144 days, a repetitive cycle. So on October 14th, we also, not only do we arrive at that 160 marker, but we also arrive at the completion of 31 of these 144-day cycles since the count began. And so you can imagine each of these 144-day packets are a gradual stepping down of the spiritual energy into the form. It's a gradual stepping down. While there's another parallel track that tracks these 113-day cycles that goes in the other trajectory, where basically it's the destabilization of the matrix, the material matrix. It's literally being incrementally undone. And the reason I'm saying that is because I imagine were it to happen at any faster of a rate, we we'd be having all sorts of greater challenges than we're
Yeah.
having currently.
Yeah.
These things have to be deliberately accommodated and acclimated to.
It's designed to be gradual.
It's designed to be.
Otherwise, it wouldn't be fun. We wouldn't have signed up for this whole experience to have the sacred contrast of going back towards, because if we just got it all like that, it'd be like,
Well, then what's the purpose? Then there's really no assignment.
there's no fun.
Then there's, yeah, exactly.
What do we come here for then?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So one thing you were mentioning, though, Brother Kohen, I wanted to mention this as well. I was reading the terminology you have written on your website, and you were just kind of tapping into giving us, I think, an indication of that. But it's that living stillness of the universe. I'm quoting you now, by the way, because that's from your website. But I think you were speaking to that, and that's the place that we want to, be open to experiencing, in that regard. And I just wanted to really articulate that because I was hoping you'd actually say it in those terms, but I wanted to quote you specifically just to say that is, it's just something to relish, is this sense that there is that living stillness of the universe. That's, I mean, come on, what a beautiful thing to, even as you have in your own experience accessed that, as you've said, in your own ways, through deliberate practice or through maybe some phenomenal experience or event in your life, just to know that there's a repository where that's the case. And that's part of the stillness, the 0 point that we're each being coaxed in our own ways to access and tap into.
We learn to become attuned to that space, and it's a dance where some people will get ripped into it at times. Some people will taste it in ceremony. How it emerges in each being is unique to their journey as a soul, but that space is more of the truth of who we are than most things that the mind tries to give name and form to. It's the backdrop of existence. And so there's like you said, it's gradual for a reason, because every human nervous system, whether they're conscious of it or not, is either consciously or unconsciously resisting an attuned relationship with stillness. Yeah.
I'm gonna let that one sink in right there. That was a good one. Just pin that one right there. Okay. Consciously, repeat that again for me. Run that back one time. That's worth saying again.
We'll run it back. Every human being on the planet, to some degree, whatever degree it is either consciously or unconsciously resisting a dynamic relationship or an attunement to stillness.
I mean, what is there to say after that?
Right.
Like,
Well, you feel the contrast of the mind, right? You
you
feel the
feel the
truth of
contrast.
who you are as stillness, and then all of a sudden the mind's much further away, and you're like, whoa, wait, wait. Like,
And the ego's like, okay, you're hosting a show. You should say something right now.
yeah.
I'm also inclined to just let that rest right there.
Hmm.
That's you just shared. I think some sweetness, accessible sweetness
Hmm.
in the complexity or maybe the concept mind is playing around with. But it was
Right.
worth having you repeat that because you know
Hmm.
repetition is perfection. So we are all invited to repeat that and put this perhaps on repeat. But I want to certainly encourage people to follow up with you, brother, because I think you're here, as I said, you're offering the medicine from your own direct experience
Hmm.
that is invaluable.
Hmm.
And also the fact that you've been living into since 2018, as you mentioned, since we were last in each other's physical presence at Nexus on a boat in the
New York Harbor.
New York Harbor
Yeah.
there. Uh, yeah, I remember that quite well. But
Mm,
just to know you've also been deliberately moving through this experience of a non-transactional relationship with life,
Hmm.
through what some may qualify or contextualize as a gift economy sort of frequency or moving through in that. Let me ask you this. In light of the shifts and the systems changes, where do we see the gift economy sort of approach, like that which you've
mm,
experimented with directly on yourself within your community and exchanges?
yeah.
How does that show up in this future mapping of these crystal hubs and communities?
I think we're again we're in an early stage where you have game A, you have game B, and you have the bridge between game A and game B. So right now we need some fiat currency, and we're participating. We need to feed ourselves, and then game B, tokenomics, sacred economics, all these different ways of exchanging value, and then the bridge to get there between. So for me, I have a foot in both, and I'm also working on the bridge. So I know people that are fully in game B, and they're very unrelatable. Like you have to go inside of their bubble and participate in that frequency in order to like experience value exchange in that world. And then in game A, some people only play that way, and so you exchange value in that space. And then the bridge, people do both. Sometimes we'll take payments in Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever. Like I've committed, and what I teach, clients of mine that are also healers and transformational guides is always have a free offering. Do the thing that you do free no matter what, and some people only live in the high end offering thing and they're very inaccessible, and I have some respect for that, and there's some things that I think are off about it in the culture, and so we each have to find our way of returning into a right relationship with the energy and frequency of reciprocity and
Hmm.
the attunement to the energy of reciprocity, or Aini. Like that's a soul journey just as much as accessing stillness. That's something that I've had to heal through my lineages, where I've had scarcity or greed or withholding, any of that stuff that comes up that we all have to navigate in third dimensional being in a
Hmm.
human body in a kind of culture like this. How do we heal that? How do we do the work of valuing our time and energy enough to not overly give, or to not be a hoarder and be withholding with our energy. Like, what's that balance of being an autonomous being that can value our energy and find and listen and attune to what is the healthy exchange of energy here? What is correct? What is the reciprocity? Am I making payments to the energy, to the spirit world in this area? When I come to a place, am I asking permission? Like, all these things matter. The more multidimensional you are and the bigger your role is, the more responsibility you have to be in reciprocity, actually. And so you'll get smacked up by the universe until you find the middle way of doing that reciprocity. And sometimes we have to go fully into that game B and have a surrender experiment and realize that life will take care of us, and that money is not source is source, and source will give us money. If
Hmm.
we're, like these little subtle but profound shifts in awareness that can change our relationship with how we exchange energy and value, we are in that collective discovery. I don't have there's people that are much more versed in like the technological tokenomic governance models of exchanging value and having applicable UIs and ways of really tracking this in a cool way. And I love nerding on this stuff. But in terms of like the energetics and the cultural framework, that's my piece for it. Is like we need to actually learn to attune into what reciprocity actually is and do the deconditioning work so that we can track the shadows that show up in reciprocity, in sacred exchange, what gets in the way, and it's usually, oh my God, I'm not going to have enough, or oh my God, like if there's some part of the identity that thinks it needs more, it's, like all the kind of shadowy stuff that can live in those spaces, and we're brought up in cultures that glorify criminalized mentalities. We're brought up in cultures that like glorify extractive billionaire archetypes. Like it's we have to be willing to track and decondition some of that stuff, and one way or another the universe is going to purify and check us up, when all your stuff has gone in a fire, or you all of a sudden your health is taken away from you and you're like you have a stroke or something. It doesn't matter how much money you did or how many people you like finessed. Like life is going to show you yourself. And so getting into alignment with reciprocity, there's so many fractal degrees of what that can look like, and peeling the onion back of reciprocity. I'm very much in a humble exploration of what that looks like, and that's been a big part of my work as someone who holds space for people and moves through both worlds. I've had to get checked up by the ancestors a lot to find right relation with energy exchange.
Yeah, definitely. I certainly appreciate that. As you said, we're all figuring out what that's going to look like for the near term and the longer term. Feeling it's going to reveal things that we can't even quite yet imagine.
We'll live into it. We'll live into it and discovery together.
Living into it, yeah. I want to pull one visual up just to reinforce some of what you're saying, but you mentioned the array of 12 with 13 at the center. And so as we've kind of looked at a model for systems change ourselves over the course of the past several years, he said, this guy, hey, we got images. But the idea is this is just to give an illustration for folks tuning in out there as one interpretation of kind of the shifting systems change model. We're going to get into more of this in the future, some future episodes. But this is just a general array of 12 around the one. We also identify that in the geometries as the vector equilibrium geometric structure of 12 points equidistant around the 13th center. And in this case, we put the timekeeping center at the center of this model because of the structure of operational systems. And we understand that we do have an antiquated operational system in light of the Gregorian calendar that is not applicable to our well-being. Yet we understand that we can begin to make some systemic transitions and transformations, and we posit the idea of a 13 moon calendar as a harmonic standard at the center that allows us to perceive not just the economic lens or that exchange lens, but a myriad that all work together in coherence. So I just wanted to put that there because as you were mentioning the idea of that 12 around one,
I love it.
Felt appropriate just to posit.
Yeah, it's super beautiful to like. I actually feel a lot of delight in my system, like this deep wave of satisfaction and like cosmic giggle amusement energy of like, where like I didn't know you had this when I said 12 around the one before. It's emerging through us, and the delight comes from, it's not like I can look back at the years as a Loka and how much I felt responsible for the collective, and like how much I thought I had to do as an individual, and how hard I pushed myself, and the delight now of like, oh, we got it. Like I got my slice. You got, like if we're all really doing our piece, like, what a relief that it's self-emergent and that it doesn't belong to anybody. All this aggrandizement that we see out in the culture of like this savior identities, and we got to be the group or we got to be the one. It's like, no, we're all doing it. And so the sooner that we embrace what's truly ours, like to do, You know, your kuleana, if you will.
Yeah.
That's it. That's doesn't need to be extra. It doesn't need to be greater than. It just is, and it's so beautiful, this reflection of seeing, you know, your expression of that, of these core emergent, you know, expressions that are moving. You know, they just want to happen through us. The life wants it to happen. So, you know, it's so delightful.
Right
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Well, in Lakesh, thank you, brother, and thank you for being available to spend some time, space with us here on this podcast. We really, really, truly appreciate that. I want to encourage folks out there that want to follow up with you to visit your website, lukekohen.com. That's LukeKohen.com. And that you are available. You do provide services, you do take on clients. So if you are somebody out there who is seeking some support at this time of tremendous change, and by the way, another plug, I know you have a new music video coming out soon called Changes, correct?
February 11th.
February 11th. So go ahead.
Birthed out of the climate changes of the Ohio fires, and resurrected last year, and now with the recent catalyst of Topanga in LA and the Palisades and all the other fires. And it's like, oh, this needs to come out. So
very, very, very timely, and I'm certain will certainly resonate with people. So look out for that February 11th. You can go ahead and pre-save on Spotify, if I'm not mistaken. You have pre-save on Spotify for that coming out. So be sure to check out lukekohen.com. You can find out about all of his music, as well as his services, what he offers in terms of his guidance and expertise, and how he is here to be in service and to be in a sacred exchange with those out here as well, navigating and pushing in and living into this emergent regenerative future. But I do, again, want to thank you for taking the time and exploring some of this with us today.
Thank you so much. An amazing conversation. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. And I tell you, as we go out, I'd like to share another video from you. We played a little bit of a song at the beginning from your song Breath of Life, which is only about 3 weeks old. You just dropped that a few weeks ago.
It's recent.
That's awesome.
It's from my artist perspective, it's old material, but it's still good. It needs to just go out, but it's new for everybody else.
It's for those who haven't heard it or who are resonating, they're happy to hear it. And so, and I feel the same as an artist as well. I have stuff that I don't know if I'm ever tired of hearing.
Part of the journey. Part of the journey.
A little older and not as present, but nevertheless, I'm gonna share a song here called. Let me pull it up here. What am I sharing? I am sharing Tea Life. Now, this was released about 6 months ago, so it's a little further back. But I got to say, the visuals on this, the performance, the production, everything is just such a beautiful coming together of
a really fun video,
exquisite artistic expression. So congratulations to you on your creative journey, and thank you again for just being the bard whom you are and sharing the medicine in all the circles that you traveled, where spirit is guiding you to be. And as we continue to make steps towards this golden intersection, we're going to check in with you and just keep you abreast of where we are and tracking this consequential intersection. But because of your frequency, we definitely want to know where you are in the map.
Let's stay in the pulse and keep the build going, ride into the golden timeline.
Absolutely, my brother. And with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and just share this song, and then Ruben will come back and we'll wrap things up. But for the listening audience out there, thank you for tuning in with this journey of the Galactic Spin and getting a chance to tap in with our brother right here on location, Brother Luke Kohen. And we give thanks for everybody out there tapping in. Stay tuned in Lakesh.
Find me sipping tea, flowing chi, golden sea, light elixirs, Taoist scriptures, depictions activate meridians, 5 elements, organ systems, open up a portal, 9 immortals transmitting, presence, eloquence, and precision, dojo of life is how we live it, moving meditation, anchor in the dantian, pour the pu'er, oolong and green, top shelf show yin yang serene, cultivate positivity above to below, balance mind like a samurai, tiger holding pearls, crane gliding in, play hot, molded with perfection, peace in all directions, resurrection of the golden dragon lineage, hot water boils OG, plant medicine, rain, sunlight, and wind, ancient tech to go within or enjoy with friends. You can find me pouring tea, living free, sipping tea, simply be ancient leaves and trees, sacred recipe. You can find me pouring tea, living free, sipping tea, simply be ancient leaves and trees, sacred recipe. Good energy, that good, good energy. 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 Tea for every mood, deep dive into the silence. Stillness of the universe you can find inside us. Feng Shui, astrology, numerology. The mystics knew what this tea could do. From Kuan Yin to Lao Tzu, tea destiny. Path of self-mastery, the methods vary so we carry on. Pour some more hot water on this living ancestor. High teacher of the plant kingdom. Creative forces in the palm of your hand. Hourglass drip like grains of sand. Starlight, the essence of plants. Plant, the essence of man. Until peace reign again across all the land. Until peace reign again across all the land. You can find me pouring tea, living free, sipping tea, simply be ancient leaves and trees, sacred recipe. You can find me pouring tea, living free, sipping tea, simply be ancient leaves and trees, sacred recipe. Good energy, that good, good energy. 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 You can find me pouring tea, living free, sipping tea, simply be ancient leaves and trees, sacred recipe. You can find me pouring tea, living free, sipping tea, simply be ancient leaves and trees, sacred recipe. Good energy, that good, good energy. Good energy, that good, good.
All right, all right. So grateful for that creative posit in the broadcast this evening. Fantastic artwork, music, visual
Yes.
representation from my dear brother Luke Kohen.
Good energy.
Good energy, that good energy. We love that. So definitely big shout out to brother Luke Kohen. Again, for those interested in following up, please check him out at lukekohen.com, LukeKohen. All right. So special shout out to Ken 160. What a blessing to have him in the field tonight, huh, brother?
Yeah, it was a really amazing example of the multidimensional nature of an artist and all the different roles that he can play and the amazing ability to express those roles and become like a real model for more people to embody the qualities of the Renaissance, Regeneration man.
Mm.
Regeneration man.
Regenaissance. Yeah, we
Regeneration
love that.
human.
We love that. That's a
Regeneration human.
classic name. I'm going to be using that again and again. And so, in terms of what's next, y'all, thank you for staying tuned with us as we are navigating ever towards this phenomenal incoming timing concerning the golden intersection of timelines. I mean, today we're 252 days out from October 14th, 2025. We began really recognizing this container, this holographic container of 260 days. And given the energy of the past episode with Mother Muja last time and with Luke Kohen dropping in and sharing some reflections from the sort of leading edge of the regenerative culture movement, I think we're beginning to really see where things are shifting and what they're shifting towards. And the universal theme I keep hearing repeated is the invitation to go within. And in particular, the way that he described it today is that point of stillness, being in that stillness, being the stillness effectively, that we can be in that spacious space of neutrality and stillness in that regard. So, as we continue to navigate closer and closer toward the timing of this once in a lifetime and once ever event, we really invite you to endeavor to going within more and more. Make it the rule, make it the oasis, if you will, of yourself, for yourself. And in doing that, know that you're synchronizing with others who are also doing that. That perhaps right now the external is not so much the place to be congregating or concerned with congregating, but really we need to access the capacity and the potency of what it means to get into that stillness, to really be that. And so in light of that, we want to continue to encourage people to stay apprised of what we're up to here. We will, in some future episodes, in fact, take you on a bit of a deeper journey into the recent publication that you'll find in our Medium blog at medium.com/at the Harmonic Factor, where you'll find a whole series of articles. But one in particular that has just been published is the special report, Harmonic Entrance to the Golden Intersection of Timelines. So I do encourage people to go check that out. I think Ishel, in fact, or maybe she has or could put the link for that article in the chat for folks to have easy access to it. But we encourage you to take the 20 minutes to go through this article and read it and reread it, because it lays out a lot of important factors. We really kind of frame it in the sense of 4 key harmonic factors and 7 syncs or 7 synchronicities. It's preceded by a perception into the 7 crises that we're also navigating. And so we want to posit a clarity on the crises, the compounding crises that we're sort of meeting in this moment, and then provide this framework or this lens as a way to navigate this, arguably very perilous time. Though when we take the effort to access and encode and decode ourselves, to really orient ourselves to who we are and where we are in this process, beautiful things emerge, synchronicities pop out, and a certain assurance occurs. It's sort of like what Luke was describing as a feeling of this golden wave of energy, of feeling like also a joy at knowing that you're not alone. You know what I'm saying? You're being reflected. We're being reflected. So with that said, we just want to again share with that for folks to get into and just take to comprehending what you're receiving there. Okay, we want to encourage that, and also we want to invite you to visit, of course, the ongoing. Well, actually, before I get there, I'm going to pull up this other visual really quick, just to again provide folks. You know what? I think I want to actually reflect back on something we didn't get a chance to drop in on. Perhaps we could just posit this at this moment because it was worth it. But it comes up in the concept of the G-force that we were showing earlier, and I don't want to lose the value of making this particular offering So if you want to speak to this, Ruben, that would be great.
Yeah, we forgot to mention this during our sinking section, in the fact that we are now entering that green castle of enchantment, that cycle at the heart of the journey board, that is at the center, and the color green happens to hold the phi ratio of the spectrum, of our the spectrum of visible light for us human. So in this chart we can see how that green line that creates the intersection between the color green and the musical scale show that even within that spectrum, the golden proportion is connected to the color green, which is the heart, and to that quality so present in nature, the quality of the color green, and how that reflects life. So, what we just wanted to make emphasis is that when we enter that this 52-day cycle, we are always entering at the heart of life itself. So let's be more present and more still during this 52-day cycle. A lot may be happening in the world. It will continue to accelerate, but the more we can hold that sweet point of stillness in which we can observe. And I love one of his takes on being aware but not beware. Be aware but not beware, which is a very small big difference. And navigating this time from that with that strategy is really important, because it's we don't want to really play ignorant and play fool, but we also have to hold space for all this transformation to take place, including everything that we may or may not like, or agree or may not agree with. Holding all of that into the container of neutrality will really help things to move and flow, which is the one of the key aspects of this entire 13-day cycle, and this 50-day cycle that starts with the energy of the moon, is to really flow and check our emotional state on several times a day, just to go back to that point of stillness when we feel agitated, when we feel that something inside of us is or in our bodies is trying to talk to us. Just going back to the heart and to our breath and to the stillness of that moment of awareness, that we are always have the ability to respond to what is happening instead of reacting. So it is much more easier said than done, but it is a good reminder just to stay in that place and and, and live from there. It's because this is a daily practice. It's not like something that comes easy from one day to another. It's just a process of continual refinement. So thank you so much for bringing such an amazing guest today, and thank you to everyone that has been tuning in, because as you mentioned before, we are in that trajectory towards this harmonic node of resonance, which is the golden intersection of timeless, and this space is a space to hold vigil for these 52 weeks until we arrive to that point. And this is an entire 260-day gestation window that we have open since last episodes 7 days ago, where we are really creating that container, that safe space for this consciousness to emerge and for the harmony to express and for the inspiration to flow. And the more we go to that daily practice of stillness, the more easy that flow of life and that flow of inspiration will come through us. So thank you so much for
Beautifully said.
this.
Beautifully said. And thank you as well to Ishel for that amazing opening video this evening, to Alejandra for all of your support and steadfastness, keeping us on track as we continue to make this journey towards this golden intersection of timelines. We look forward to the next episode. It'll be the 19th episode, so it promises to hold some very strong catalytic energy, as it's the frequency of the current year that we're navigating as well, the year 19, blue rhythmic storm year. And with that, we want to encourage you to please take your phone out and take a picture or use the QR code on the screen to go and sign the ongoing online petition. We're actually intending that we start to hit a little bit of an exponential curve with the signatures,
Mhm.
whereas we're currently at I think about 14,300 or something like that. We intend by October this year to reach 144,000, and I know we can do it because I know the more that we're consistent with this production, for example, the greater the concentration of energy leading people in this direction is going to be. So others will hopefully be inclined to support this open petition for Calendar Referendum Initiative 2028, as well as this Universal Declaration of World Peace. And that is what that petition really reflects. So we certainly invite you to support that. And of course, we invite you as well to download your own copy of the 1328 harmonic synchronometer that we produce at the Harmonic Factor. Thank you for your support in acquiring that. Please note it is a PDF digital download only. We will not be sending you a physical product in the mail. It's digital download only. But we put a lot of love and intention and time and energy into this particular offering and this tool. So we encourage you, if you are a DIY, do-it-yourself kind of person, we encourage you to take it to your local print shop and print it out for yourself. If you do want the wall version of it, they can certainly help you with that at your local FedEx office or Staples or photocopy shop. But it also works great on your tablet or on your cell phone. You can use it as a PDF and digital tool at your fingertips. So we certainly encourage you to get a copy of that yourself. We are in the 7th moon of this year. We're almost through the halfway marker completely. We'll be soon entering, as of next episode, we'll be within the first heptad or first week of the 8th moon. The tone of that moon is a tone of integrity. And so as we navigate that, we're going to be witnessing with this proper attunement how we're moving into greater and greater integrity. And so we'll be able to witness that together. And I think with that, we've had a great episode. Thank you to everybody tuning in as you do and staying the course along with us. And be sure to let other folks know about this broadcast. They can also find us at the Harmonic Factor on YouTube. And if you're so inclined, you can also find us on Facebook at the Facebook page, Harmonic Convergence 2020 through 2028. So with that said, unless you have any things to say here at the closing, Ruben?
Just giving thanks and a big shout out to our friends Luis from Colombia and a friend in Mexico who is already planning an amazing event for the Golden Intersection. So we are happy to see more and more support coming from our friends and local communities, and we hope that we can keep bringing please come back to the website. We are putting more content on it, making it more easy and summarized so that people can get different takes on what the golden intersection is, depending on your ability to comprehend the information and or your time constraints. Sometimes we just need to have like the basic idea of what this is. So we are doing our best to really cater to everyone's needs and do our best to describe what this unique point in time is all about.
Absolutely. So definitely check out the articles. You'll find, as he said, a distillation to the best of our ability of this knowledge on the website, theharmonicfactor.com/golden-intersection. And also check out the Medium article, medium.com/at the harmonic factor. So thank you everybody for tuning in. We will be right back here with you in 7 days' time to synchronize and harmonize and elevate the vibration together. Okay? One love, in Lakesh, Alaki.
Tune in with the Galactic Spin podcast and expand your view. With the Galactic Spin podcast and expand your view.